morning and welcome to our class on Oedipus. There are several things I need to say to you. I was just looking at the syllabus and I think we're moving along pretty well. I noticed that I put for the video over the weekend and that, but it's really good to watch it as we go along. And I have to say, one of the things that surprised me is that the character playing Oedipus, or the actor playing Oedipus, Christopher Plummer, is a young man, fairly young, and handsome. Somehow I always expected that Oedipus would not be. A couple of things I wanted to mention. The name Oedipus means swollen foot, and I don't think they emphasized it enough in your play, but when he was, as a 3-day-old infant, put out on the hillside to die, I don't think there was any danger of him moving anywhere, but they pinned his ankles together. And in some versions of the play, he limps a bit, but in this one, he seems very agile. Another thing, your book has tried to give the text in a kind of poetry, and that's accurate because the Greeks certainly wrote their plays in poetry. This presented a bit of a problem in the Renaissance in England when they were so enamored of ancient Greek and Roman drama and so on. And they too wanted to have poetry. And as you probably remember from Macbeth, the Shakespeare and all the great writers used iambic pentameter. They were imitating Marlowe, Christopher Marlowe, and it's sometimes called Marlowe's Mighty Line. But actually, he copied it from Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey. He and Wyatt were the two guys who really brought the sonnet into England and many aspects of Greek poetry and so on. But Wyatt decided that the unrhymed iambic pentameter was a good substitute for Greek poetry, and so all the others followed suit. One thing I'd like to point out is that Greek plays were very stylized. For one thing, very often the people, especially in a large amphitheater like Epidaurus, weren't close to the stage, and they wouldn't have been able to see the actors' facial expressions. So masks were used. If you look at the versions of the Oedipus plays, you'll see that one play actually used these large stylized masks. And I was a little upset that the video of the play shows Oedipus and Jocasta getting kind of friendly with each other, and even in bed. The play would never have shown things like that, and they never showed horrible things like murder or suicide or eye poking with pins or anything like that. The feeling was that what you could imagine was always much tougher than anything they can show. And I think there's some truth in that. Years ago, I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark, and at one point when the bad guy was backing into a plane propeller, I just couldn't bear to watch because it was so terrible. Found out later they didn't show anything. They just left it to your imagination. So do remember the use of masks and it being stylized. They did not show violent action on the stage. Another thing I wanted to mention was about Jocasta. She is rather skeptical about prophecies and encourages Oedipus to be skeptical about prophecies, and that's not a good thing to do because you don't mess with oracles since they are the reflection of a god, and gods can get angry really fast, and you shouldn't dismiss these things. But she wants to set Oedipus's mind at rest, and she feels good facts to support that. Now, one of the things we talk about a lot is the tragic flaw. Your book doesn't like this term, and they're really hostile about using it, but they recognize that it is in common use. I hope you remember from yesterday that the word used is hamartia, which is an archery term meaning just missing the mark. Sad to say, in our own lives, I think we can see that we miss the mark fairly often, at least in my life. But we start saying, well, what is the personality trait that Oedipus has that brings about his downfall? You know, there's always the question, did he have any choice? if the gods decide that something's going to happen, that's it. Sometimes, even in Christianity, we talk about God's foreknowledge. And if God knows we're going to do something, does that mean that we are destined to do it? Well, we usually say no. Although Puritans felt that when you were born, God knew whether or not you'd be saved, and this was called predestination. I myself don't have much truck with it. There are lots of things to read about it, and I'm sure you may have I would imagine you've discussed this in Brother Cashin's class. Now, did the oracle make him do what he had to do? Well, the oracle did have a causal effect on the action because it caused Oedipus to make a vow to discover and punish the murderer. And this was a good thing because remember, the plague was so terrible that plants were rotting, people couldn't bring pregnancies to fruition, there was sickness over the land, and since the oracle said, well, you've got to find the cause of this corruption and root it out, Oedipus certainly says, well, I will do that. The whole movement of the play, though, is toward knowledge. So he has to find out the identity of the murderer, and along the way, Oedipus finds out his own true parentage. Now, sorry, having a little trouble here with my handwriting. I talked yesterday a little bit about his pride, but in a way, his pride is justified. He has been the one who saved Thebes by solving the riddle of the Sphinx. He has been a good king for about 20 years. You get the impression the people have a lot of confidence in him. And as a good king, he undertakes the actions that will save the country, that will lift this terrible plague. And then he unflinchingly goes on when others beg him to stop. I'm a little distracted here because I can see the scabs on my nose. Yes, I fell again on my face on Holy Saturday. Other people fall and break their wrists. I fall on my face. But I think you'll agree it's not as bad as the last one. Anyway, moving along. So the pursuit of knowledge is what's going on in the play, trying to find out who killed King Laius and what is Oedipus's parentage. He gains knowledge of the most horrible kind, even when people beg him to stop. Like Tiresias says, don't ask these questions. But he persists. He presses on to find the truth, and even when he finds that he is the pollution, he insists on the sentence that he has proposed or pronounced on whoever is the pollution, that he be driven forth. So I don't think we could say that pride is his tragic flaw. What about the rashness? Someone who is very impetuous, who just does who responds without thinking. Certainly when he killed King Laius and the 5 men with him, well, actually 4. There was a herald on a horse, then King Laius in his chariot, and then 4 slaves running along behind, one of whom escaped and is crucial to finding out the identity of Oedipus. Okay, so pride, well, he's justified in taking the actions. He wants to stop the plague on the country, and I would point out that perhaps his killing of King Laius and his entourage is the first example of road rage that we know of. And you can see that Oedipus has a good sense of self. Now, he's been brought up as the son of the king and queen of Corinth, and he's going along the road, and when apparently the charioteer encourages his herald to run Oedipus off the road, bad move, because Oedipus then kills the herald and then kills the driver of the chariot, not knowing it's Laius, and then kills 3 of the slaves that are following. So we'll say, no, pride, I'm talking about his tragic flaw is not rashness or impetuousness, though he could do a bit better. Is it arrogance? he was told that he would kill his father and marry his mother, and so he would not go back to Corinth. Is it his arrogance in thinking he can escape from what the oracle has proposed? No. As I said, his pride is justified. He has been a wise king, and a wise king will take responsibility for his people. The oracle said, search for the murderer, and he's doing exactly that. Is it rage? Is it kind of a paranoia? Like, even when he rages at Tiresias and is suspicious about Creon's involvement in a plot against him, well, he's reacting with such anger because he is certain he did not kill King Laius, and having this blind seer come along and tell him he did is infuriating. And then he says, well, who told me to get this seer? And it was Creon. And so he says, well, Creon is involved in this. And he implicates Creon and believes that they're in cahoots, and he is furious. So what is his tragic flaw? Well, some critics would say it's his insistence on learning the truth, his insistence on extending his knowledge to discover himself fully. He can't stop. He has to find out the truth. But he's kind of between a rock and a hard place, because he has to find out the truth of the murder in order to save the people from the plague. But should he have stopped when people kept begging him to? Even when Jocasta tells him, stop asking questions, you won't like the answers. And I think at that point, he is more intent on finding the answers of his parentage than of averting the plague. That's just my opinion. The sight, blindness, dark, light, ironies that abound point in this direction, toward an enlightenment too great for man to bear. It's as if he can't help himself. So I'd have to think about this, but the most recent critical stuff I read said that it is his determination to continue when anybody normal would have stopped. His persistence, I suppose. Now remember, tragic flaws aren't always bad. Like, think about Macbeth. His tragic flaw, and it wouldn't be called a tragic flaw except it made him murder folks, but they can be good. Ambition is good. A certain amount of pride can be good. Lots of these things. Anyway, so what I'd like to do is look at the play with you, and I hope that in the movie you could see that people got pretty angry. Now, again, it was a rather stylized drama, and many people say, well, students don't like this because there are lots of speeches and so on. But they act in a very human way. I'm looking now on 1244, and remember I said the chorus had 5 functions. Hint, hint. The functions are at the bottom of 1236, and they are commenting on what Tiresias said and how people responded. And Creon comes in. He is furious. He has heard that Oedipus believes that he was in cahoots and that Oedipus has called him a traitor, etc., etc. He said, I'm cold disloyal to the state. And the Caragos says, well, he may have spoken in anger. He wasn't serious. But Creon said, did you not hear him say, I was the one who seduced the old prophet into lying? And we're on 1245. And the Caragos says, well, yeah, but I don't think it was that serious. And I don't know. I can't judge the behavior of great men. Well, Oedipus comes in and he just goes ballistic. You dared to come back to my house, you murderer. Do you think I do not know that you plotted to kill me, plotted to steal my throne? Oedipus likes being the king and being in charge, and any hint that there is a threat against this really, really bothers him. I'm not a fool or a coward. I know your slippery game. I think one of Oedipus's faults is that he jumps to conclusions without having real facts to back it up, and Creon tells him that. But he taunts Creon. Thrones may be won or bought. You could do neither. Real put down for Creon. And Creon says, listen, let me talk too. You cannot judge unless you know the facts. And Oedipus says, yeah, you're all palaver. I find it hard to learn from the deadliest enemy I have. Creon says, if you think there's anything good in being stubborn, I say you are wrong. And Oedipus says, if you think a man can sin against his own kind and not be punished for it, I say you are mad. I agree, but what have I done for you? He said, well, didn't you tell me to get that wizard? And of course, that's a put down too. I did, and I would do it again. And then he says, how long since Laius vanished? Was the prophet practicing then? He said he was. Did he speak of me? No. And then 1247, the inquiry, I suppose you held one. We did, but learned nothing. Well, why didn't you get the prophet to speak then? Oedipus says. He says, I don't know, and I am the kind of man who holds his tongue when he has no facts to go on. Oh, burn. And Oedipus says, well, there is a fact, you know. If Tiresias were not involved with you, he could not say it was I who murdered Laius. And Creon's getting tired of this. Now keep in mind, Creon is his uncle. He doesn't know he's his uncle, but he is the brother of Jocasta, and so he'd be at least 15 years or so older than Oedipus. And he says to Oedipus, look, the situation is that three of us rule Thebes, you and Jocasta and I have the best part. I don't have the worries of ruling, but I get the advantages. I have the power, but I don't have the responsibility, and people are always very nice to me because they know I'm involved with you and Jocasta. And he says, listen, if you don't trust me, go to Delphi and ask the priestess there if I told the truth, that you had to find the murderer in order to rid the city of the pollution that caused this terrible, terrible plague. And Oedipus is just beside himself. And Creon says, what is it you want, to banish me? He said, no, not exile, it's your death I want. And they go back and forth, you're a fool, you're evil incarnate, but suppose you are wrong. Oedipus says, still I must rule. That's an interesting point that I haven't really seen people point out. Not if you rule badly. And Oedipus says, oh, city, like I have to take care of the city. Creon is not intimidated. It's my city too. Well, the Corygos, I looked it up. They say Corygos. He says the queen is coming. And this dreadful quarrel is a very bad example. Well, Jocasta comes out. Poor foolish men, what wicked din is this? With Thebes sick to death, is it not shameful to you that you rake up some private quarrel? And she said, Oedipus, come into the house. And you, Creon, go on now. Let us have no more of this tumult over nothing. Well, both of them want to make their case. Creon says, nothing? Your husband wants to kill me or send me into exile. And Oedipus says, I do. I caught him squarely plotting against my life. Well, that's not accurate. And Creon says, no. Accursed if ever I wished you harm. And Jocasta said, believe it, Oedipus, respect his oath. And the Corygos says, open your mind to her, be ruled. So Oedipus says, so you want me to go along with Jocasta and just let him be free? And they said, respect Creon's word. He's never spoken like a fool, and he has sworn an oath that he has not conspired against you. And Oedipus says, you know what you're asking? You're going against me. And he says, and if you agree with him, you're asking for death or exile for me. Because, of course, if they go along with Creon, they're going along with Tiresias, and Tiresias has foretold this. And the Corygos says, no, that's not the case. But they ask him to be at peace. Let him go, and let me die if I must, or be driven by him in shame from the land of Thebes. It is your unhappiness and not his talk that touches me. So Oedipus says, okay, I'll forgive him, but not because of him, but because of you, Corygos. As for him, wherever he goes, hatred will follow him. It's almost like a schoolyard quarrel. But I thought this was interesting. Creon says, ugly and yielding as you were in rage. Natures like yours chiefly torment themselves. And there's a lot of psychology in that. So Oedipus does, in a way, say sorry, or he cedes that he will allow forgiveness, but in such a bitter way that Creon says, ugly and yielding, even when you give in, it's as bad as when you're angry. Natures like yours chiefly torment themselves. People who have a bitter heart. And Oedipus said, just go. And the Caragos talks to Jocasta, and she asks, who started this? And he said, well, both. And then the Caragos says, Oedipus, it is not once only I have told you, I'm looking now on page 1250. Jocasta says, in God's name, Oedipus, inform your wife. Why are you so set in this hard anger? And he said, well, I will tell you, but I'm not going to tell the chorus. It's Creon's work, his treachery, his plotting against me. And she said, well, explain. He charges me with the murder of Laius. And Jocasta says, does he know? Is he speaking from hearsay? Oedipus, he would not commit himself to such a charge. He's saying, he's too wily, he's like a snake. But he has brought in that damnable soothsayer to tell his story. Jocasta says, listen, don't be upset about soothsayers. I tell you that you will find no man whose craft gives knowledge of the unknowable. Soothsayers aren't worth a dime. Here's my proof. And she says, an oracle reported to Laius once that his doom would be death at the hands of his own son. 1251. His son, born of his flesh and mine. Now you remember the story. Laius was killed by marauding strangers where 3 highways meet. But his child had not been 3 days in this world before the king had pierced the baby's ankles and left him to die on a lonely mountainside. I'm kind of puzzled about piercing the ankles. A 3-day-old baby wasn't going to be crawling anywhere. And I also wonder, how did you pierce the ankles? And did it cause permanent damage? Well, that's just an aside. So Jocasta said, thus, Apollo never caused that child to kill his father. She said, I just told you, marauders did it. And it was not Laius's fate to die at the hands of his son, as he had feared. His son was dead. He had been abandoned on the mountainside. This is what prophets and prophecies are worth. Have no dread of them. It is God himself who can show us what he wills in his own way. But, she's going merrily on, and a real shadow has crossed Oedipus's heart. He said, how strange a shadowy memory crossed my mind just now while you were speaking. It chilled my heart. Line 685. What do you mean? What memory? Well, you said Laius was killed where 3 roads meet. Where? Well, focus, near Delphi. Now, don't forget, Oedipus had gone to Delphi to ask about the prophet, to ask if his parents in Corinth were really his parents, but the oracle had told him, you will kill your father and marry your mother. So Laius is going probably to Delphi, and Oedipus is coming back. And then he says, why does this trouble you, she asks. He says, well, what did he look like? She said he was tall, his hair just touched with white. His form was not unlike your own. Then line 700. Now, in my mind, this is when he really starts to think maybe he is the one. I think that I myself may be accursed by my own ignorant edict. His pronouncement that whoever killed King Laius should be exiled or put to death. Jocasta, 1252, you speak strangely. It makes me tremble to look at you, my king. I am not sure that the blind man cannot see. So he wonders if Tiresias is telling the truth. I am not sure that the blind man cannot see, but I should know better if you were to tell me. Was the king lightly escorted or with a large company? 5 men, one was a herald and a single chariot. Then Oedipus says, that makes it plain enough. He's really sick here. But who told you how it happened? And she said, a household servant, the only one to escape. And is he still your servant? And she said, no, when he came back and found you enthroned in the palace in the place of the dead king, he came to me and begged to go off to the hinterland. Well, of course, when the servant came back and saw Oedipus ruling, he recognized him as the man who had killed King Laius. I granted his prayer. Oedipus, can he be called back? Easily, but why? Then Oedipus says, I have taken too much upon myself without inquiry. Now, it wasn't that exactly what Creon said to him? You need to examine stuff. Therefore, I wish to consult him. She says he will be back right away. And Oedipus, bottom of the page, I have reached a pitch of wild foreboding. Is there anyone to whom I should sooner speak than you? And then he explains that Merope was his mother, the queen of Corinth, and Polybus his father. And once when they were having a feast, a drunken man shouted out that I was not my father's son. And he said, I went to my father and mother. They were really angry that anybody had said this, but the suspicion remained aching in my mind. I couldn't rest, and he said, saying nothing to my parents, I went to Delphi. Line 745, the gods dismissed my question without reply. The god, he spoke of other things. Some were clear, full of wretchedness, dreadful, unbearable, as that I should lie with my own mother, breed children from whom all men should turn their eyes, and that I should be my father's murderer. Well, thinking that Polybus and Merope were his parents, he realized he could not go back to Corinth. I heard all this and fled, going farther and farther away, to a land where I should never see the evil sung by the oracle, and I came to this country where you say, King Laius was killed. And let me tell you something that happened. There were 3 highways, and a chariot, and a man such as you describe. The groom forced me off the road at his lord's command. But as this charioteer lurched toward me, I struck him in rage. The old man brought his double goad down upon my head as I came abreast. He was paid back and more. Swinging my club, I knocked him out of his car. I killed him. I killed them all. Now, the video actually shows some of this, but this would not have been done in the ancient Greek drama. Now, if, 1254, going down about 7 lines, if that stranger and Laius were kin, he can't bring himself to say more than kin. Where is a man more miserable than I, most hated by the gods? Citizen and alien alike must never shelter or speak to me. I must be shunned by all. And I myself pronounce this malediction, curse, upon myself. And then he says to her, think of it, I have touched you with these hands that killed your husband. Now he's thinking he's maybe the murderer. What defilement? Am I all evil? It must be so. Since I must flee from Thebes, yet never again see my own countrymen, for fear of joining my mother in marriage and killing Polybus, my father. At this point, he thinks maybe he killed King Laius, but he figures he could not have killed his own father and mother because they're back in Corinth. If I was created so, born to this fate, who would deny the savagery of God? And the cargo says, we have dismay, but we need to hear from the shepherd. And Oedipus says to Jocasta, yes, I'm really counting on the shepherd to set my mind at ease. She says, well, why? And he says, well, if he insists that marauders killed the king, then I know I didn't, because I, one man, single-handed did it. But if he says one man did it, top of 1255, the evidence all points to me. And she says, oh, no, he always said there were several. And don't be concerned. He can never show that Laius' death fulfilled the oracle. For Apollo said, my child was doomed. Apollo said my child to doom was doomed to kill him, and my child, poor baby, it was my child died first. No, from now on, where oracles are concerned, I wouldn't waste a second thought on them. Oedipus, well, you may be right, but let's get the shepherd in. And then the chorus has a very powerful ode. And, well, I told you this strophe and antistrophe, they're moving back and forth, and they're wondering what can be the truth here. Now, in 1256, Jocasta comes in and tells the chorus that her husband really is not himself. He's got his prophecies messed up, and so she is bringing branches and incense to the gods. And then on page 1257, the messenger comes in. He is rather unctuous, vocabulary word, a little oily, and he asks where indeed he can find Oedipus. And the cargo says, well, that's his wife and mother of his children. And then there's a little back and forth, and he tells her, I'm from Corinth, and the news I bring ought to mean great joy for you, though there's some grief in it. And maybe this is the first instance of, I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that Oedipus is now king of Corinth. The bad news is that there's a vacancy because his father is dead. Now, normally you don't jump up and down and say, oh, good, his father is dead. But to Jocasta, it indicates that he can never kill his father and marry his mother because his father is dead. And she sort of taunts the gods or taunts the oracles. Around line 900, old King Polybus, is he reigning still? No, Polybus is dead. And further down, line 901, O riddlers of God's will, where are you now? This was the man whom Oedipus long ago feared so, fled in dread of destroying him, but it was another fate with which he died. And Oedipus, why have you sent for me? This man has come with great news. What is the news? Well, he came from Corinth to announce your father's death. Oedipus asked, is it true? Tell me in your own words. Top of 1258, treason or an act of illness. It's interesting to me that right away he wonders if the king was killed by treason. Well, he was an old man, and the messenger says, a little thing brings old men to their rest. Right now, it seems the coronavirus is out to get older people, but we do not like for people to call it the boomer remover. Just a little note to people. All right, now, Oedipus says, why should a man respect the Pythian heart or give heed to the birds that jangle above his head? Now Oedipus is showing disrespect for the soothsayers. They prophesied I should kill Polybus, but now he's dead and buried. I never touched him, unless he died at grief for my departure. No, Polybus has packed the oracles off with him underground. They are empty words. And Jocasta says, I told you so. And he says, you did. It was my faint heart betrayed me. I'm never going to think of those things again, but I still have to fear my mother's bed. And she said, why would you be afraid? Fate rules us and nothing can be foreseen. A man should live only for the present day. Have no more fear of sleeping with your mother. How many men in dreams have lain with their mothers? No reasonable man is troubled by such things. Well, I don't know about those dreams, but sometimes little boys think that they will grow up and marry their mothers. Now, Oedipus said, that is true, if only, though he said, my mother were not still alive. And but the news of your father's death is wonderful. Yes, but I fear the living woman. And the messenger said, well, why are you afraid of her? And Oedipus says, an oracle of the gods, a dreadful saying. Well, what was it? Apollo said through his prophet that I was the man who should marry his own mother, shed his father's blood with his own hands. And I've kept clear of Corinth, though it would have been sweet to see my parents again. The messenger said, and this kept you from Corinth? Well, Oedipus said, would you have me kill my father? Messenger said, well, I just told you there's no problem. And if you could reassure me, I would reward you. Messenger, old oily unctuous person, said, I had that in mind, I will confess. I thought I could count on you when you returned to Corinth. Well, the fact that I announced that you were going to be king of Corinth, I figured you'd be nice to me when I got there. Oedipus, no, never going near my parents again. And the messenger says, well, you know what you're doing. Well, if these are your reasons for not going home, I'm afraid the oracle will come true, and guilt come upon you through your parents. That's the dread. Well, all the fears are groundless. Why? Am I not my parents' son? And then messenger, line 964, Polybus was not your father. It's kind of like, boom, not my father? No more your father than I am. Why did he call me son? Well, he had no children, and his heart turned to you. What of you? Did you buy me? Did you find me by chance? Line 972. He said, yes, I was tending my flocks, and I was your savior. From what did you save me? Now, 977. Your ankles should tell you that. Okay. At this point, though there's no mention of it, this is when Jocasta, as they say, the penny drops. Your ankles should tell you that. I pulled the skewer that pinned your feet together. And Oedipus says, yes, I have had that mark as long as I can remember. Messenger, that's why you were given the name you bear, Swollen Foot. And then Oedipus said, was it my father or my mother who did this? Messenger, I don't know. The man who gave you to me could tell you. He said, you didn't find me? No, another shepherd. Who was he? Well, he was one of Laius's people. You mean the Laius who was king here years ago? Yes, that man was one of his herdsmen. Is he still alive? Can I see him? And messenger says, well, these people can tell you. Oedipus asks, does anyone here know this shepherd? Have you seen him? If you have, tell me. It is time things were made plain. And the Cargo says, I think the man he means is the same shepherd you've already asked to see. Jocasta could tell you something. And Oedipus says to her, do you know anything about him, lady? Is he the man we have summoned? Is that the man this shepherd means? And Jocasta, for whom everything is crystal clear, says, why think of him? Forget this herdsman, forget it all. This talk is a waste of time. How can you say that when the clues to my true birth are in my hands? As we said, Oedipus is nothing if not persistent. Jocasta, for God's love, let us have no more questioning. Is your life nothing to you? My own is pain enough for me to bear. Well, Oedipus, again, jumps to the wrong conclusion. He thinks that after Jocasta has heard that a shepherd got him from a worker for Laius, that perhaps he was base-born, he was low-born, maybe the son of a shepherd, and she would be horrified to think that she married someone who was not indeed the son of the king and queen of Corinth, but the son of a serving man. And he kind of berates her for this in a rather sarcastic way. She says, my own is pain enough for me to bear. He says, you need not worry. Suppose my mother is slave and born of slaves, no baseness can touch you. She says, listen to me, I beg you. Do not do this thing. I will not listen, he said. The truth must be made known. Jocasta, everything that I say is for your own good. My own good snaps my patience then. I want none of it. Jocasta, you are fatally wrong. May you never learn who you are. Oedipus just ignores her. Go, one of you, and bring the shepherd here. Let us leave this woman to brag of her royal name. You want to say, oh, Oedipus, you are way off the beam. All Jocasta says is, miserable. And they're the last words we hear from her in the play. That is the only word I have for you now. That is the only word I can ever have. And she goes into the palace. Cargo says, why has she left us? Why has she gone in such a passion of sorrow? I feared this silence. Something dreadful may come of it. Oedipus, let it come. However base my birth, I must know about it. The queen, like a woman, is perhaps ashamed to think of my low origin. But I am a child of luck. I cannot be dishonored. This is when you want to shout, "Oh, Oedipus, you are way off." I am a child of luck. This is irony, because he certainly isn't. Luck is my mother. The passing months, my brothers have seen me rich and poor. If this is so, how could I wish that I were someone else? How could I not be glad to know my birth? And we will stop there. And I think, it's really kind of terrible that we're really getting to the point here. We'll talk more about climax tomorrow, but have a good rest of the day. And I'm going to see if I can turn this off without making strange faces and creeping. Okay.